You are listening to The Tribe, Episode 1, What's Happening in the World. My name is Ricky Goodall, and you shouldn't blindly believe anything I'm going to share with you here. You shouldn't blindly trust me or anything I say. The truth is, I make mistakes in my communication often, and sometimes I say things that turn out to not be true or not be accurate. And the purpose of this webcast, I guess you could call it, or podcast, or whatever you like to call it, the purpose of this is just to sort of share my perspectives on what's happening in the world, what has happened in the world, and maybe what will happen in the world, and how that affects each of us individually. And my why behind this broadcast is because a tribe is defined as a group of people or a community with similar values or interests. And I define the tribe as a community of heretics, rebels, outlaws, outcasts, and misfits who think for themselves and believe that they are a higher power, a higher self, God, creator, or conscious universe, pretending to be just human. So for those of you who don't know me or aren't familiar with my work, I'm trained as a coach. I've been working as a professional coach for a number of years. I'm initiated as a shaman. I was initiated in the Andes Mountains under a family of indigenous healers called the Herreras at Etnica's Integrative Healing Clinic. I'm formally licensed as a professional mixed martial arts fighter. I had 21 professional fights in my mixed martial arts fighting career, and I believe that I'm the chosen one. And I believe that you are too. And I'll explain a little more about that in today's episode. And if you want to learn more about my beliefs and the things that I believe in, the research that I've done, and the sources I've gotten my opinions from, you can check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/higher level potential. And in it, I share some of my views on spirituality, religion, science, behavioral psychology, and a lot more, and how that all pertains to us as individuals. So the purpose of this webcast is to inspire faith and optimism and renewal and hope in the world. The world's going through some really intense things right now. During the recording of this specific episode, we're all under quarantine. The whole world's under quarantine right now, and I'll get more into that in a little bit. The purpose of this webcast is to help you, the listener, find purpose and passion in your life. I believe that you have a purpose inside of you that's so great, so extraordinary, that if you fully aligned with it, you'd be able to change the world in a tremendous way, just by aligning with your passion. I really believe that to be true. I believe that we are all divine beings. I believe that we are all the higher self, the authentic self, the God self, the Krishna, the Christ, the Horus, the Buddha, the Atman, whatever you want to call it. I believe that we are all that, playing life as just humans. And I believe that we are all experiencing life subjectively. What that means is that you're experiencing your own individual experience of reality. I'm experiencing my own individual experience of reality. And our realities are kind of meshing together. And we're experiencing each other in each other's realities, but our realities are unique. Now that's a mind-bending concept. Subjective reality is a concept introduced by a man named Steve Pavlina. If you look him up, you can find out more about his views and perspectives on subjective reality. It's the idea that you are both the dream and the dreamer. Think about that. You're the dream and the dreamer. So if you were dreaming right now and I was in your dream and you woke up, you would realize I wasn't actually in your dream. You were just sort of projecting me in your dream as a reflection of your consciousness. Well, this idea of subjective reality is basically saying that. It's sort of saying that you are experiencing your own individual, unique version of reality. Sort of like, for lack of a better term, a video game. Sort of like a video game. Sort of like you're playing your own video game. So if we play with that idea and imagine that you're playing your own video game and you're sort of this higher self, or this authentic self, or this God self, if you will, this creator self, experiencing the video game subjectively, does that make you God? Well, yes and no, I think. Does that make you creator? Does that make you a manifestation of the conscious universe? Well, maybe yes and maybe no. Maybe yes as a sliver of that infinitely, extraordinarily powerful entity or being, if you believe in such a thing. And no, because although we can be of it and part of it and a manifestation of it. To say I am God would mean, okay, well then, why can't I lift my house up with my intention? And who knows, maybe I can get to a point in my life where I can achieve these types of things. These are the kinds of things I'm going to be talking about in this broadcast, in this podcast or webcast or whatever you'd like to call it. I believe that we are all divine beings experiencing our own sort of video game, and that life is like a video game. And if you've ever experienced a synchronicity or a miracle or a coincidence that you just can't seem to explain, and it feels very video gamey, that's what I'm talking about here. Elon Musk said there's a 1 in a billion chances we're not living in a simulation. 1 in a billion chances we're not living in a simulation. Quantum science kind of explains this as like the holographic universe, a universe made of a hologram, basically. Quantum theories like the Copenhagen interpretation, the double slit experiment, they sort of tell us that reality is both a particle and a wave at the same time. Dr. J.B. Ryan, parapsychologist, did some experiments back in the 1930s and discovered that we can actually change how reality acts or behaves through our intention. Our intention can affect reality. Now, again, you shouldn't believe anything I'm saying here. You might think, wow, this is crazy. I don't believe it. It's too out there. I get it. I had a real hard time accepting these possibilities as well. But the truth is, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. Think about anything you've ever learned, any skill you've ever developed. When you started that skill, you didn't really know anything. You were unconsciously incompetent. You didn't know what you didn't know. Think about the first time you drove a car. Before you drove a car, maybe you knew that you didn't know how to do it, but what about before you even heard of what a car was? At that point, you would be unconsciously incompetent. You don't know how to drive a car. Then you learn what a car is, and now you know that you don't know how to drive a car, so now you're consciously incompetent. Now you know you don't know how to do it. Then as we move up the levels of competence, we get to the point where we're consciously competent, where we can drive the car, but we have to look out the window, the windshield. We have to pay very close attention to our hands and our feet and what we're doing. We can't mess around with the radio or drink a coffee or have a conversation with the person beside us. And as we become more competent, we become unconsciously competent. We can drive from Nova Scotia to Toronto and barely remember anything that happened, because we're so in the flow, listening to music, singing to ourselves, talking to ourselves, listening to an audiobook or what have you. We drove that vehicle mostly unconscious almost the entire way. This is unconscious competence. And so we don't know what we don't know. So at this point in our lives, when we look at the universe, we look at reality, and we see that things are a lot more bizarre than we've been led to believe. People like Donovan Bailey break records in how fast they can run. Martial artists like Bruce Lee defy the odds in terms of what they can do with their body and what they can do with their mind. We hear about these ancient healers and magicians like Moses or Jesus or Buddha who have been able to do really incredible things with their minds. Or Paramahansa Yogananda wrote the book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, where he talks about these yogic gurus performing miracles in front of his eyes. And he wrote an entire book about it. So we don't know what we don't know. We don't really know what we're capable of. So are we God? Are we creator? Are we the conscious universe? I don't know. In my experience, and based on the experiences I've had in shamanic ceremonies and esoteric wisdom and the studies that I've done, I mean, there's a lot suggesting that maybe that is what we actually are. Maybe we are manifestations of the divine, pretending to be just human, for the sake of growth and evolution, for the sake of experiencing the beauty of creation, and maybe we're capable of a lot more than we realize we are. And maybe we get to that point of reaching our fullest potential through faith, through awareness, through practice, and through consistent will and courage to take action in our lives. So this first episode, I want to talk about what's happening in the world. There's so much happening in the world right now. We're under quarantine. There's a virus called the coronavirus 19 spreading all over the planet, apparently killing thousands of people. I only say apparently because I don't know for sure. Of course, I hear about the headlines. I hear about these things happening, but I have to be humble. I only know my own experience of reality. I only know what I can see, touch, taste, hear, and feel. Feel inside of my heart, not just with my touch, but feel in my heart and in my intuition. But needless to say, based on what I'm perceiving in the world around me, people are suffering. People are suffering from the virus, and people are suffering from fear, which is another virus. The world's under quarantine. We've been told to distance ourselves socially, to stay away from people up to 2 to 3 meters, 6 feet or more, to keep our distance, to only go out when we absolutely need to stay home otherwise, so that we can stop the spread of this virus. We've been told to stay home from work, to disconnect, and to really just, again, stay safe, stay home. Now, we still have some businesses that are open here in Nova Scotia, in Canada. We've got grocery stores, we've got liquor stores, we've got fast food restaurants which are available for drive-through, we've got restaurants which are available for takeout, and some smaller businesses that are still open. But for the most part, everything is shut down. What is happening in the world? The economy is shut down in a way that we've never experienced in our generation. What is happening in the world? These are questions I ask myself. And considering I believe that I create, or at least am co-creating my experience of reality with a divine intelligence or a divine expression or manifestation of the universe. In other words, I believe that I'm co-creating my experience of reality with God, with Creator, with the all, the everything. And so if that's true, what am I creating right now? What's the world that I'm creating? And it's very easy to go in two different directions. I can say, I'm creating the demise. I'm creating the end. I'm creating Armageddon or the apocalypse. And on the other hand, I can say, well, I'm creating a world transformation. I'm creating a revolution. I'm creating a change bigger than any I've experienced in my life. These are the questions I ask myself. What am I creating? What's happening in the world? And don't get me wrong, I'm a human being. I'm sometimes a victim of my own anxieties, a victim of my own fears and imagination. And sometimes I let my imagination get ahead of me and I start to create stories in my mind that tell me that things are really terrible and getting worse. But then I recognize that I have the power inside of me to choose. And that choosing, that is the true power, because I get to choose what I'm creating. I get to say I'm creating demise or I'm creating opportunities. And so I've been digging. I like to dig. I like to understand. And I remember when I was maybe 18 years old, I watched a movie called Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist. Now it's been all but proven that a lot of the information in the movie Zeitgeist wasn't completely accurate. The guy that released it, I think it was Peter Campbell, I think his name was. I can't remember exactly. The guy that released it released a lot of really valuable information. He created the connections between this character we call Jesus Christ and many of the other deities in history, like Krishna, Horus, and some of the others. He suggested or presented the idea that the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Centers, maybe they were an inside job. Maybe there's a lot of evidence to suggest that they weren't actually airplanes being flown into buildings by terrorists. Were there airplanes flying into buildings? I mean, according to video footage, there was. So, of course, we've got lots of evidence to say that that happened. Was it the airplanes that took down the whole buildings? I don't know. I'm not an expert in that field. But there are some theories and some speculation that suggests that maybe there was more to it. Maybe there were already explosives in the building. Maybe there was more happening under the surface. This movie Zeitgeist, back when I was 18 or 19, around that time, opened me up to a new perspective. It made me start questioning religion, something that I intuitively felt was off without needing to question or having any kind of sources to question it. It challenged me to think that maybe this whole 9/11 thing, maybe there's more to it. Maybe it wasn't terrorists hijacking airplanes, flying them into buildings for the sake of attacking the U.S. Maybe there was something more to it. Is there something more to it? Again, I don't know. I'm not an expert in this field. These are just my opinions. And again, I don't think you should blindly trust anything I share with you here. Just let it be inspiration for you to find your own truth. So I started digging into these ideas back when I was 18, 19, and then I kind of stopped. It wasn't making me feel good. Diving into these conspiracy theories, so they're called, weren't making me feel good. So I took a different direction. At 22 years old, I watched the movie The Secret. I heard of this whole idea of imagining what we want, and I knew I'd done it before in my life. I knew that when I was a teenager and I started playing music, I used visualization to become a great musician. I used it to become a great martial artist, and when I was 23, after visualizing and imagining myself as a professional fighter, I became a professional fighter. I was homeless at 22, jobless, sleeping on a friend's couch. He challenged me to watch the movie The Secret. I did. I watched it. I was really profoundly moved by it. I could feel that there was something there. And within a year, I became a professional mixed martial arts fighter. So I knew it worked. I could feel it. I saw the transformation it created in my life. And so from that point forward, I went on a different path. I let go of the conspiracies. I let go of the other narratives about what could be happening in the world. I let it all go. It wasn't bringing me any happiness. It wasn't making me feel good. I focused on being an athlete, on being an entrepreneur. I kind of grew my career that way. 28 years old, I watched the movie The Secret again after a devastating breakup and really started diving deep into it. I started researching all of the people in the movie. I looked into their backgrounds. I read some of their books. I watched their videos. I read about how they got their start. Some of them meditated. Some of them studied quantum science. Some of them studied psychology or hypnotism or emotional freedom technique, or these different techniques that can help me heal my pain. In 2012, I went through this devastating breakup, watched the movie The Secret, and recognized that the patterns in my relationship were rooted in my childhood. They were rooted in my past. And so I started really diving deep into all of that work and recognizing how my behavior in the present moment was creating my reality. I mean, it says that in The Secret. It says that in almost any of these, what would you call, New Age, I guess, theories. But you know what? They're not just New Age. They're ancient. Books like the Kybalion talks about the 7 hermetic principles. And there are 7 of these principles that give us the idea that we can create our own reality through our behavior, through our thoughts, through our words, and through the energy that we hold. And I knew that for some reason my behavior I was behaving in one way even though I wanted to behave in another way, so I had to know more, and I kept digging. 2012 was 8 years ago from the time that I'm recording this episode, and in that time, my whole life changed. I wrote a book on this whole idea of manifesting and creating our reality, and I started diving even deeper into shamanism, into using plant medicines like psilocybin, dimethyltryptamine, ayahuasca, San Pedro to help me heal. I traveled to Peru multiple times and worked with coaches who are specialized in subconscious reprogramming and helping us heal the pain of our past. I trained under shamans in Peru and eventually became initiated as a shaman. And now here we are back again at me considering other narratives for what's happening in the world. And if you believe the mainstream narrative, what's happening in the world is there's this really scary virus, and it's deadly. It kills people. I checked the numbers today. Again, I'm not an expert. These are just the numbers that I'm reading on the Worldometer's website, I believe it is. It's at a rate of about 6.9% worldwide, a mortality rate of about 6.9%. The flu, I believe, is 1% or under, 1.5% in some cases. This is 6.9. Now, the coronavirus is a brand new virus, which means that none of us are immune to it. So the mortality rate naturally is going to be higher because we're not immune to it. Now, apparently the effects of it are far worse than a flu. I don't know. I didn't have it as far as I know. And I don't know anyone personally who's been infected by it. I don't know how bad it is. I'm not going to say it is or isn't as bad as as a mainstream media narrative is saying it is. I don't know. I have to be humble. I have no idea how bad it is. But I know something strange is going on because it sounds like what the government is saying and the media are saying is that we're going to be locked up potentially until a vaccine comes out. Now, I've never taken a vaccine in my adult life, and I'm not going to take a vaccine. there are a lot of stories about what might happen if we don't take vaccines. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to share any more fear or spread any more fear. But I still find it interesting because I am finding myself getting curious about the other narratives. Now, one thing we know for sure is that in the last few years, we've had some really interesting things happen in the world. We've had this whole Jeffrey Epstein case come out, where this man apparently has an island, an orgy island, where, and this is just speculation, I don't know if this is true, I'm just sharing the mainstream story, or maybe it's not even a mainstream story, maybe it's a kind of an underground story, but the story is that Jeffrey Epstein had an island that maybe potentially had a lot of pedophilia happening, and maybe even human trafficking. And apparently there were some very well-known celebrities, media personnel, and government officials on this island, and that there are logs in the flight logs of people going to this island. Jeffrey Epstein was arrested because of this, and in jail he died, and then the official result for how he died was suicide. Now, I've heard so many people say that Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. People like Ricky Gervais or Joe Rogan and many others are saying he didn't kill himself. There's just too much evidence to suggest he didn't kill himself. So what happened? Well, we don't know what happened, at least not yet. So there are conspiracies, and listen, just because something's a conspiracy doesn't mean it's not happening. Let me find the official definition. I could have gotten that earlier. Just because something is called a conspiracy theory doesn't mean there isn't a conspiracy happening. I mean, we call something a scientific theory, but that doesn't mean that the theory is incorrect. A conspiracy, by definition, is a secret plan by a group to do something unlawful or harmful. That doesn't mean that it's not happening. Now, I'm not saying it is happening. I'm not saying there are conspiracies. I don't know there are conspiracies. I don't know for sure. There's certainly some interesting resources out there suggesting that there may be some conspiracies happening in the world. I mean, again, this movie Zeitgeist 20 years ago, close to 20 years ago, suggested that there are some conspiracies happening in the world, and we've continued to get these breadcrumbs ever since. So I've been digging a little bit. I've been digging, learning about this pedophilia stuff happening. I was sexually traumatized as a child. I experienced, I don't even like to use the word sexual trauma because I was so young. I was 3 years old. I was, I guess you could say, sexually abused by a family member, an indirect family member who didn't treat me badly. From what I remember, I buried the memory for most of my life. I only found it a couple of years ago. I don't remember him treating me badly, but he definitely violated me because I was 3 years old. And again, this is an indirect, not a blood family member, indirect family member. So I'm passionate about this subject. I know how it can create pain. I know how it can create suffering for us when these things happen. And some of these things that I've learned about, and these aren't conspiracies. I've read blog articles by women and people who have written books, and have done many interviews about these experiences of pedophilia they had in their younger years. One girl at 11 years old was sold to a man by her mother to be used as a sex slave at 11 years old and treated like an adult. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is true. At least that's what this woman is claiming, and many other women as well. It's not the only one. Many other people in the world. There are some people in the media and some celebrities, some musicians and actors. I won't name them. There's no point. Who have claimed that they've been badly sexually abused in Hollywood by some very powerful people. Very powerful people. Some of the heads of major corporations, some of them government officials, some of them just very powerful people in Hollywood. And so something's going on in the world. Something's going on that the mainstream narrative is just not giving enough attention to. Pedophilia, human trafficking, maybe worse. And I'm not sharing this stuff to create a negative narrative. At the end of this episode, you'll hear why I'm not afraid. You'll hear why I'm not scared of what's happening, that I'm actually glad that these things are coming out because of what I believe to be the transformation coming as a result of it. So if you stay with me to the end, I promise, I'll give you the hope and the faith and the optimism that I promised that these episodes are all going to be about. This isn't about creating more fear and more panic. This is about encouraging and inspiring faith, hope, optimism, renewal, and belief that a great transformation, a great awakening is upon us. And I really believe that to be true. I've been introduced by some friends to some different sources of information, and again, I'm not saying these are real. I'm not saying these are true. I'm not saying you should believe it one way or another, but it's curious if nothing else. A documentary came out recently called Out of Shadows. It's about, it's starring and directed by a couple of men who are stunt doubles in Hollywood, working with some of the biggest stars. I don't know if this is true, if these are who they worked with, but they look like the pictures. People like Brad Pitt, people like Tom Cruise, people like Will Smith. They worked on sets. And if you've watched an action movie, these guys say that there's a chance, there's a good chance. I mean, maybe they said for sure, you've seen them in movies. If you've watched action movies, if you watched any of these movies in Hollywood, these guys were the stunt doubles doing the actual stunts. One of the guys in the documentary, Out of Shadows, when he broke his back during a stunt, and when he broke his back, he had to go to a pelvic floor specialist in Hollywood. This woman was apparently the only pelvic floor specialist in Hollywood. She asks him if she can pray over him, and he says, "You don't really believe that stuff, do you?" And she says, "It's real. Trust me. There are some really dark things happening in Hollywood, and I'm the one that has to fix these kids and these women when they're destroyed sexually in satanic rituals, in these dark black magic satanic rituals that are happening in Hollywood." Now, let me just say before we move forward that I've been studying esoteric wisdom and magic and these ideas for years. And I can tell you that although it may be scary to believe in the idea of Satanism, devil worship, or black magic, I'm fully confident that anyone playing with those practices get their karma. It comes back to them. And I'll get into a little bit more why I think this stuff may have been happening in the world and why I think that we can have a lot of hope and renewal and faith. But let me just keep going down the rabbit hole just a little bit longer. So stay with me, please. Apparently, according to this documentary, starring some very, potentially reputable people, former CIA agent, a journalist who worked in mainstream media for years, Hollywood stunt doubles, and others who have claimed and put themselves out there, spent 4 years building this documentary, that there's a lot of dark stuff happening in Hollywood. Satanic rituals, sacrifices, pedophilia, and even worse potentially. And I don't want to get into how bad, but according to these sources, really bad, really bad. According to this documentary, everything from movies like The Lion King to Bambi have subconscious undertones, messages meant to create fear and panic. You think of the movie The Lion King, within the first 30 minutes of the movie, Simba's father is murdered by his own brother. Why are we showing children movies where their uncles, where the young boy's uncle is being, or father's being murdered by his uncle? That's a terrible storyline. Or Bambi, whose mother was murdered right in the beginning of the movie. Why are we showing these movies to kids and calling them Disney movies as if it's okay? These are questions that people in this documentary have been asking. Why are we doing these things? Why are we putting so much crime and violence and drugs and terrible things in the media? Well, we create a lot of stress. Stress creates the need for a lot of medications. Stress creates the impulse for a lot of low level behaviors, low vibration behaviors, many that I've participated in, don't get me wrong. Heavy drug use, cocaine, ecstasy, heroin, these heavy drugs that come as a result of being stressed and anxious and depressed and traumatized. I've never used intravenous drugs like heroin, but I've used drugs like cocaine and ecstasy in my past. A lot of alcohol abuse happens as a result of stress and anxiety and trauma. Eating junk food, eating high sugar foods, low quality foods, garbage foods, poverty happens, domestic abuse happens, more crime happens. When we create a society that's stressed and that's traumatized, we create a sick and ill society. And if you look at our television, you look at our media, you look at what we've been consuming for the past, well, for me, 36 years, we've been consuming a lot of garbage, a lot of terrible things, a lot of traumatizing imagery. And so in this movie, Out of Shadows, the narrative, the idea is that a lot of this media, a lot of what's happening in Hollywood and what's happening in many places in the world in the mainstream media is actually being controlled or influenced by some very manipulative people. Now, I'm not saying, again, that this is happening. I don't know what's happening. I don't know. This is just the information I've come across. I'm feeling the pull to share it through this webcast, through this podcast, and put my truth out there, my opinion out there, so that we can, again, move to where I'm taking you by the end of this episode. So some of the documentaries I've watched is like the Out of Shadows documentary, and there's another series called Cabal, Fallcabal, on YouTube. Now, I'm just going to warn you, Out of Shadows is intense and caused a lot of anger for me. I actually lost my voice for a couple of days because I screamed so loud afterwards. It was so intense for me. Brought a lot of emotions up for me because I can only imagine what these people are going through. And Fallcabal is even more intense. Now, I'm not saying that all of the information is reliable or that we should trust it, but I am challenging you, if you go down this rabbit hole, that if you start, test the resources, test the sources, see what you can find that might support these ideas. Now, I'll admit, sometimes I watch these documentaries or I watch these video series, and some of the information doesn't seem accurate based on how I test the theories myself. Does that mean I discount the whole thing? Well, no, but I also don't blindly believe it either. I let my intuition guide me. And I feel I have good reason to believe that I have somewhat of an understanding of what's happening in the world. So black magic. What is black magic? Black magic is the manipulation of another person or of the universe itself. There are, in my experience, 3 types of magic. Now, when I say magic, you might say, well, magic's not real. Yeah, that's the mainstream narrative. Magic's not real, but magic was believed to be real for tens of thousands of years. The people who built the pyramids used magic. The people who built Machu Picchu, Sacsayhuaman, El Castillo, they practiced magic. And they built some really amazing structures in our world. The people who built Göbekli Tepe, the 12,000-year-old, 12,000 years old, 12,000-year-old temple in Turkey, built. And these people believed in magic. Now, what is magic? Well, magic can be many things. Magic, according to Aleister Crowley, is the art and science of causing conformity to happen with your will. So in other words, it's the art and science of transforming our lives. Now, white magic is the idea of transforming our inner world so it reflects in our external world. In other words, white magic is healing. White magic is Reiki. White magic is prayer. White magic is shamanism. White magic is any type of energy healing, any type of faith-based practices. Most religions, at least according to the mainstream, would be a form of white magic. A wedding would be a magic ceremony to a degree. Now, gray magic is like the law of attraction. Gray magic is trying to manifest or change reality externally. White magic is recognizing we change our internal reality so that we can create an external reality that reflects it. And gray magic is the practice of trying to change our external reality. Black magic is manipulating reality, manipulating others. White magic is based on the idea, and again, this is just my perspective, this is just based on my understanding. White magic is based on the idea of unity consciousness. We are all one. I am experiencing my own individual subjective reality, and everyone in my reality is a reflection of me. Black magic is based on duality. It's based on the idea that I am all that matters and I don't need to worry about anything else outside of me. Which is wrong, which is right? Well, that's not really how it works. According to these ancient esoteric texts, there is no right or wrong. There's just karma. There's just a reflection of what you've done. There's just a world that reflects your behavior. So when you think of this idea of satanic rituals and devil worship, what are we really talking about here? Is there such thing as a devil? Is there such thing as Satan or Lucifer? I don't believe there is, at least not the way the mainstream narrative understands it. I believe that this idea of Satan or Lucifer is simply the magical will, the intention, the ether, the energy behind the universe being used for either good or evil. When it's used for good, we call it Christ, we call it God, we call it love. When it's used for evil, when it's used for darker intentions, we call it fear, we call it ignorance, we call it Satan, we call it Lucifer. Is there an intelligent being called Satan, Lucifer, or the devil? Well, there is intelligence. And with magic, intention is everything. If your intention is good, then you're working with the higher energies. If your intention is negative or bad or hurtful or painful, you're working with lower energies. Now, I've studied a lot of well-known sources and contributors to the magical esoteric world, people like Eliphas Levi and Israel Regardie, and according to these brilliant men who have written books and books and books on this topic, black magic, to practice black magic, Eliphas Levi says in not so many words, but essentially, you either have to be crazy or it'll make you crazy. To practice black magic, you either have to be crazy or it'll make you crazy. He says you'll certainly get the results that you're looking for, but sometimes there's no coming back. And so, is there satanic rituals? Is there devil worship happening in the world? Yeah, we know there is. It's not hidden. The Church of Satan is, you can Google it. You can find out all about them. Are they led by healthy people? I don't know. I'm not sure. According to this documentary, Out of Shadows and Fall Kabbalah and some of the other sources that have been surfacing right now, maybe not so great. So where's the hope? We ask ourselves, where's the hope? Where do we find the optimism? I've been studying esoteric wisdom, like I mentioned, for years now. I've been initiated into a line of esoteric magicians. I've been initiated as a shaman, 2 separate initiations. I've practiced esoteric magic a number of times. I can't tell you the details about it simply based on the way it works, but I can tell you that there is a whole other world we're not aware of. And so we have to ask ourselves, how could the world be run by this satanic devil worship, by this negative stuff? How could people get away with it for so long? The answer could be found, in my opinion, in Mayan mythology and Hindu mythology, when we hear of the idea of the Great Year. The Great Year is this concept of a 24,000 year 24,000 year cycle called the Great Year, where human consciousness raises to a peak where we are all existing as one individual being, coexisting as individual humans, or whatever. Maybe there are other beings other than humans. I'm not sure. I have to be humble. I'm not sure. The idea that consciousness reaches this peak where we're all living in unity and peace and prosperity. And after we hit that peak, we start to decline for about 12,000 years. And when we hit the bottom of that decline, we're in the darkest, most dense times where we are all separate. We're all living in scarcity. We're all living in fear. We're all living in chaos. Now, according to the Mayan mythology and the Hindu mythology, on or about December 21st, 2012, we started to move from the darkest, deepest, most chaotic ages into these higher ages. Consciousness started its climb back up the cycle toward the unity, toward the light again. How long will it take? Well, thousands of years to hit our peak, but do we need to hit our peak to live in a prosperous, unified world? I don't think that we do. And I think that we can get there even quicker when we transform ourselves individually. There are so many heroes and leaders and spiritual teachers in history who have said the kingdom of heaven exists inside of you. That world, that paradise, that heaven on earth we're all looking for, it's not somewhere we get to after we die. It's something we can create here and now. is something we can create while we're alive. Now, all of the greats knew this. Buddha called it the end of suffering or enlightenment. It's called nirvana, samadhi. In Kabbalah, they call it the end of correction. When we've corrected the pain, the beliefs, the misaligned thoughts and words, habits, and behavior that lead us to suffering and lead us to this negative so-called karma, cause and effect. If we correct the unconscious behaviors, the unconscious core beliefs we formed in our childhood as a result of our relationships to our parents, our grandparents, our teachers, our siblings, and so on, when we correct those beliefs, we end up creating a different world. The shamans in Peru that I'm trained under, they call it absolute happiness. A state of happiness where we're happy no matter what's happening around us. Can we reach this state? I've had glimpses of it. I've had experiences of it. I've had days, multiple days, sometimes even weeks of it in my life. And more, the deeper I go and the more I heal. So we ask ourselves, well, then, if this great year is true, then why don't we remember? Why don't we remember what happened to us before? And actually, there's so much evidence, there's so many signs around. Now, there's another theory. And these theories I'm sharing with you are theories that I've had conversations with a man named Brian Forster. He's written 22 books on the subject of ancient human technology. He goes to places like the pyramids of Giza, Machu Picchu, Sacsayhuaman, Göbekli Tepe, and he studies these ancient megalithic sites to try to understand the technology that was used to build them. The pyramids of Giza, for example, 2.3 million blocks in that pyramid, all cut uniquely like jigsaw puzzle pieces, fitting above, below, and around them with no mortar, perfectly unique every block, each block almost as hard as diamonds. What's even crazier is that they're lined up with true north within a fraction of a degree, and they're all level, all the way up the 2.3 million blocks, 400 or 500 feet or something like that, all level within a fraction of an inch. We can't even come close to creating that now. What's more is there's more structure underneath the Great Pyramid than there is above. More structure underneath, structure we haven't even discovered yet. Underground cities below the pyramids that we don't even know about. The Egyptian government has blocked them off for the most part. People aren't even allowed to study it. Is this information being suppressed? Who knows? Maybe. I mean, we can think about the Library of Alexandria that was destroyed by religious mobsters. 700,000 books and scrolls destroyed in the name of religion. Suppressed information, esoteric wisdom. Esoteric wisdom that teaches you the same stuff that I'm sharing with you right now. Now, according to Brian Forster and many other researchers that I've heard about, there was something called a Great Flood 12,000 years ago, on or about. You might have heard of it as Noah's Flood. Now, I'm not saying Noah's Flood's an accurate recount of this story, but it's interesting to say the least. According to these researchers, there's evidence. I lost my train of thought for a second. There's archaeological evidence that there was a flood 11,500 years ago, on or about. The flood wiped out most of the planet. Now, according to these ancient wisdom keepers and shamans that I've spoken to, a lot of these people hid in underground cities, maybe like those in the pyramids of Giza. They found other underground cities in Turkey. Maybe they hid on the tops of mountains, like places like Machu Picchu and other mountaintop resorts and temples that we see all over the world. Ancient temples built with technology we can't explain. This great year wiped out most of the race, most of the people on the planet, and wiped out most of civilization as we know it. Who were the people that lived on the planet before them? Well, there's lots of names. We've heard of, was it Plato, Atlantis, Lemuria. We've heard of Rama, I believe is the other civilization. Lots of different ancient civilizations that could have existed at that time. So then we ask, well, why hasn't anything survived? And well, actually, esoteric wisdom is something that's been passed on orally for tens of thousands of years. Esoteric wisdom, magic, shamanism, healing, transformation, the work of working with nature to create transformation. It's been passed on orally for thousands of years. I'm trained in a form of coaching that can only be passed on orally. I'm trained in a form of magic and a form of shamanism that can only be passed on orally. Even what I'm sharing with you right now, I'm sharing orally, and it might, in some cases, stimulate insight and inspiration inside of you. But it's still something that needs to be passed from one person to another through conversation, through asking questions, through allowing the individual to find their own truth inside of them. So then as I went deeper into my studies and deeper into my experiences, and I've had shamanic ceremonies using plant medicines like ayahuasca that have pointed me in directions. Mother Ayahuasca showed me the 6-pointed star, the Star of David, the Seal of Solomon, the hexagram, the sexagram, so many names. She said, follow this symbol and you'll understand how to heal yourself and how to heal others. You'll understand what it means to be the creator. She said, study Hebrew, study Egyptian, study the Hebrew prophecies, study the Hebrew alphabet, go to the ancient sites in the world. And so I did. I went to Machu Picchu, I went to Sacsayhuamán, I went to El Castillo, and I plan on going to more of these places. And I started to study. I studied books, hundreds of hours of coaching, over 300 plant medicine ceremonies. And I started to read about some of these prophecies. Now there are prophecies, Shambhala prophecies, Catholic prophecies, Christian prophecies, Jewish prophecies, Hopi prophecies, saying that this is the time or around the time that the world transforms. It looks a lot like the end times that we're told about in these ancient prophecies. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean the world's coming to an end? No, I don't believe it does. There's an ancient Hebrew prophecy about a leader that comes at this time or whenever these end times occur. Now, in Christianity, they call it the Messiah, and they talk about the Messiah being this character named Jesus Christ who is God incarnated as man and was able to create miracles. Well, according to these ancient esoteric systems like Kabbalah and alchemy and many of the others, we're all God manifested as human beings. We all are. Now, not all of us remember that. Not all of us are aware of it. Not all of us are able to connect to that part of ourselves, but that doesn't mean that we aren't it. Are we capable of miracles? Yeah, we are capable of miracles. I know it to be true. I've seen powerful healers, powerful magicians, powerful shamans performing miracles right in front of me. Now, are they performing the miracle? Well, yeah, they're performing it, but it's being performed through them. They'll tell you themselves. It's not them doing it. It happens through them. Nature works through them. The universe, intelligence works through them. So we think about this character, this leader who's supposed to come. In Christianity, they call it the Messiah, but in these ancient Hebrew texts, they call it the Moshiach. The Moshiach isn't necessarily a human being that even performs miracles. The Moshiach is a great leader that unifies the people, brings them together, redeems the people of God, the people who are of faith, helps them liberate themselves, help them recognize that their pain that they experience in their reality, in their life, the behavior, the sins, if we want to call them that they participate in, are a reflection of the traumas that they have that have been unhealed. Traumas that we inherited from our society. Traumas that we inherited from these dark ages that we've all come through. Who's to blame? Is the media to blame? Are there evil people at the top of the food chain, at the top of the pyramid? There may be some very sick people. There may be some very sad, traumatized people who never healed, who are so deep into their own pain that they're not able to have empathy and compassion for others. Yeah, I believe that there are people like that in the world. There are people that are so deep into their own pain, they're not able to feel for others. But are they the ones that are to blame? I don't think so. I think the one to blame is consciousness itself. Because like I said, consciousness goes through this great year, this great cycle. So we're coming out of these dark ages. So if there's anything or anyone to blame, it would be God itself. It would be the creator of our universe. It wouldn't be any one individual or group of individuals to blame. Does this mean that we shouldn't bring those to justice who are creating this pain in the world? That's not what I'm saying. I think that it's time to stop the pain. It's time to stop the suffering, the abuse, and the trauma. I think it's time to release the wisdom that's been suppressed for thousands of years. I think it's time for a transformation, for a revolution in our world. But I don't think that there's any one person or groups of people to blame. I think that all we can do is work to heal ourselves and transform the collective through our own personal responsibility. So do I believe that there's a being named Jesus Christ who's going to come in the clouds? No, I think that the name Jesus comes from the ancient Hebrew formula, Yod He Shin Vav He, Yaheshua. the highest self, the core being that exists inside of each and every one of us, the being that exists between us and the unimaginable creator we call God. I believe that Yeshua is the highest self, the authentic self, the true self, what they call in Hinduism as the Atman, the Krishna self, the Buddha self, the core self that exists inside of every one of us, the oversoul of humanity. Is there a second coming? Is there a being that's going to come and save us? Maybe. Maybe that being is you. Maybe the Christ, maybe the Buddha, maybe the Krishna, maybe the Moshiach, maybe the Messiah is your own awakening. Maybe it's the being that exists deep inside of you. Are we living in the end times? I think we're living in the end of a time. Yeah, I do. I think we're living in the end of an age, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that there's a global transformation happening. I think there's an awakening happening. Will there be more death? Will there be more destruction? I'm not sure. Will this virus play out and get worse? Will we be looking at darker times? I don't think so. I think that things are only going to get better. I think that there are some very great forces and great people working for us right now, working to help us, that we don't even know about. Some of them we even judge and criticize. Some of them we even ridicule. I think there are some leaders in the world who have been ridiculed and judged and verbally crucified. And we might be surprised at how many of those leaders are actually working for us. But I don't know about that yet, so we'll just have to wait and see. Again, these documentaries like Out of Shadows and the video series called Fall Cabal, the fact that these are even available now and not being suppressed shows us that something's happening in the world. Something is happening. There's a great awakening happening. So the question is, well, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do individually? Well, I think we can have faith. I think that we can pray. I think that we can heal. I think that we can play the video game. I think that we can serve in our own unique and inspiring way. I think that we can do our best to contribute to the awakening and tipping the scales of the darkness that's run our world for the last 6,000 years or so, and start to invest our energy and our time into optimism, into faith, into hope, using generative words like things are only going to get better, as they always do. Things are always going to get better. The world we're living in is not the way I believe it's meant to be. I believe that we're set up in a system of slavery. I was born into poverty in Canada. I mean, that's not even the poverty I've seen in places like Peru and Mexico. Heartbreaking poverty. I was born in poverty in Nova Scotia as a white man. My family's still on social assistance, traumatized, addicted to drugs and alcohol when I was younger, drug dealers, again, homelessness and so much more. I grew up in food banks and soup kitchens, and I climbed my way to where I am now, and that was challenging. It was challenging. Our world's not the way it's meant to be. We shouldn't be forced into working jobs that don't bring us love and inspiration and hope and excitement. We shouldn't be forced into school systems, not actually forced, of course, but forced in the way of being criticized and judged and ridiculed and rejected if we don't give in to the status quo. That's not the way it's meant to be. We all have a powerful purpose inside of us. We've all got something more that we're destined for, something more, something greater inside. And I believe that the world's moving toward a time where we're going to recognize that. The wealth that's been unfairly distributed, that's been hoarded by, again, people who have been in pain. People who have steeped so low into their darkness that they can't imagine sharing their trillions or their billions or their millions of dollars with others. But that's coming to an end. No one can escape the raising of the ages. No one can escape the raising of consciousness. No one can escape the lighter ages. Consciousness is rising. No one can escape it. And we see this in the world now. We see it happening all around us. And right now, with the fear and the pandemic and the chaos that's happening in the world, it's scary. It's scary to think that what if things get worse? Yeah, but what if they get better? What if they get better than they've ever been? How can we tip the scales? How can we do our part? Have faith. Use words of faith. Speak the truth. Don't preach. I don't think preaching is the way to do it. I don't believe in preaching personally, but I do believe in inspiring. I do believe in leading by example. I do believe in humbly and courageously speaking our truth, not as fact, but simply as opinion, my opinion, the way I see it. And you shouldn't believe anything I say, but follow the breadcrumbs. If you're curious, follow the breadcrumbs, follow the clues, follow the synchronicities, follow the signs, and create a narrative that feels right for you. It's easy to slip into fear. It's easy to slip into chaos. It's easy to slip into the darker times. It takes courage to have faith. It takes courage to have hope, and that's what we need in the world now. We need courage, we need faith, and we need hope. That's it for this episode. What's happening in the world? My name is Ricky Goodall. Thanks for listening. Thanks for giving me your time. I hope that this episode in some way inspired you and hopefully has given you the hope, the renewal, the optimism that you need to use this time to find your purpose, to align with what makes you feel most inspired and passionate in life, and to create a life of playfulness for yourself. Because if we're playing a video game, then aren't we supposed to be playing, not taking it so seriously? How fun is a video game when it's too serious? It's not fun. You shut it down. You don't want to play anymore. So let's get back to playfulness. Let's get back to hope and faith and renewal. That's what this is about. If you've enjoyed this experience, you've enjoyed this conversation, subscribe to my channel on YouTube, youtube.com/higher level potential. And if you'd like to join my online tribe called The Tribe, just like the title of this webcast, podcast, broadcast, whatever you want to call it, check out rickygoodall.com/The Tribe. There's no cost. You'll join a Facebook group, you'll get on an email list, and maybe even a social media platform that we launch in the next couple of months where you can have a conversation and know that you're surrounded by like-minded people. Again, no cost. Sign up, rickygoodall.com/The Tribe. Thanks for listening. Share this episode with someone that you think could benefit, and let me know in the comment section of wherever you're watching it, wherever you're listening. Let me know in the comment section what hit home for you, maybe what you don't agree with, what you do agree with, or maybe you have something you'd like me to check out. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you soon.